Thank you to Dr. Viluatham and to all our distinguished panelists for their contributions. Moving right along, we will now head straight into our next panel discussion about infrastructure development in the Indo-Pacific. Through 2030, there is estimated to be over $20 trillion invested in infrastructure to meet the growing needs of countries in the Indo-Pacific. This discussion will focus on where those needs are, how companies can fulfill those needs, and what tools can government use. Before we begin this panel, we would like to play a short video showcasing the U.S. Trade and Development Agency and its work supporting infrastructure development throughout the Indo-Pacific.
The Indo-Pacific region contains about 2/3 of the world's population, and they need about $1.7 trillion of infrastructure financing on an annual basis over the next 15 years.
In the Indo-Pacific region, the countries we are most active in are India, Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Thailand, but we are, of course, looking to expand.
The U.S. government's Indo-Pacific vision aligns perfectly with USTDA's priority sectors of infrastructure, energy, and telecommunications.
The agency is a targeted tool for a more precise age of economic development.
Another thing that makes the agency successful is that we have been doing this for over 25 years, and so we have supported over 4,000 project infrastructure activities in over 130 countries.
And that's why USTDA is really excited to be doubling our impact in the region, both in the number of projects that we're supporting as well as our physical presence throughout the region. We focus on quality infrastructure because that is what our partners demand, and that is what U.S. companies can provide.
Infrastructure is a very high need in a lot of the countries in the region, and that is where USTDA can come in and help support these initial project preparation activities and provide other opportunities to connect U.S. businesses with these very fast-growing markets.
And that's really where USTDA's tools come into play. By coming in at the earliest stages for project preparation, we create bankable projects that then attract the right financiers to the region.
And USTDA is able to step in to introduce a quality solution, American technologies, American manufactured goods and services to help ensure that the investment that they make is going to last them, going to last for generations.
With the Indo-Pacific region, one of the greatest things about it is we have a lot of great partners, whether it's in the public or the private sector, and we have the ability to affect millions of people's lives.
USTDA really comes in at the right time to meet with the right people to get the right projects off the ground.
In the Delhi area, we help Tata Power, the local power distribution company, institute a lot of smart grid practices, and that has really helped improve the efficiency and energy access within that network.
Every day, our team is working to evaluate the best opportunities throughout the Indo-Pacific region. We're figuring out where is the best place to go, how best to go about it. We're partnering with U.S. industry, and we're creating relationships and partnerships in the region that are built to last. We talk about this all the time, and what we focus on is just doing good projects. There are opportunities where everybody can win. Our team is not afraid to take on the biggest challenges facing our world today.
So I think what really drew me here was the fact that we do have that dual mandate, and we are helping people both domestically and abroad.
Ultimately, our mission is clear. See that American jobs are created, that quality infrastructure is built, and that U.S. innovation touches new lives in every corner of the world.
Our moderator for this panel is Alexander Feldman, President and CEO of the US-ASEAN Business Council. And now let's meet our panelists. First up, please welcome to the stage Thomas R. Hardy, Acting Director of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. Kanit Sangsubhan, Secretary General of the Eastern Economic Corridor Office of Thailand. Christopher Smith, Senior Vice President, Policy, Government and Public Affairs at Cheniere. Wouter van Wersch, President and CEO, GE-ASEAN in Singapore. And we're all set for the panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Feldman.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's good evening. Good afternoon. Something in between. Welcome. This is an exciting panel. Thank you for being here. I'm Alex Feldman. I'm the President and CEO of the US-ASEAN Business Council. And the US-ASEAN Business Council is a trade association that helps American businesses grow in Southeast Asia. And as you know, ASEAN is the heart of the Indo-Pacific. And we've got a great panel. A number of people can talk beyond ASEAN, but Dr. Kanit and I are focused solely on ASEAN and Thailand. We obviously are focused on the $20 trillion opportunity in infrastructure across the Indo-Pacific, but we'll also delve deep into ASEAN as the heart and Thailand as a microcosm of what ASEAN and the greater Indo-Pacific could be. As you probably know, I hope, ASEAN is the third largest economy in the Indo-Pacific, the fifth largest economy in the world. And it is growing at a steady 5 to 6% rate every year, and it's predicted to do that for the next several decades. And by the year 2050, ASEAN is supposed to become the world's fourth largest economy. There's a competitive marketplace for infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific, but at $20 trillion, no government can solely finance their infrastructure needs off of their balance sheets. They need to bring in the private sector, they need to bring in multilateral organizations, and they need to bring in other governments, including the United States government. So we've got an incredible panel that includes Tom Hardy, the Director of the U.S. Trade Development Agency, Dr. Kanit Sangsubhan, the Secretary General of the Eastern Economic Corridor here in Thailand, Christopher Smith, the Senior Vice President of Policy and Government and Public Affairs at Cheniere, and Wouter van Wersch, the actually Asia-Pacific CEO for GE. So we're really glad that we could have these four panelists talk to us, and what I've asked the panelists to do is to give us an overview of how they see infrastructure from where they sit in their organizations. And we're going to start with Tom Hardy, who is, as I said, the director. He's acting director of the U.S. Trade Development Organization. We're really pleased that you could be with us, Tom. You've had an incredible career at USTDA, including concurrently being in charge of congressional and government affairs, and then before that being chief of staff and also head of Asia Pacific and Africa operations in those regions. Prior to that, you had a stint in the International Trade Commission of the United States, as well as on the very powerful Ways and Means Committee staff of the House of Representatives. So I'm going to turn it over to you for your opening remarks, and then we'll go down the line as well.
That is an impressive memory. Thank you, Alex. It's my pleasure to be here. And let me begin by saying what an honor it is to be on this panel and to be sponsoring this Indo-Pacific Business Forum. This would not be possible without all of our sponsors, the Royal Thai Government, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, our support from the US-ASEAN Business Council. Really appreciate everything that the sponsors have done to make this possible. Let me start where you left off, which is I think you laid out the gap. There is a tremendous infrastructure gap that's taking place throughout the Indo-Pacific region. One of the key challenges we hear is the financing is there. What we see is EXIM Bank is now stood up and operational. The DFC is doubled in size. but what has been lacking is the development of bankable infrastructure projects. And that's really right where the U.S. Trade and Development Agency comes in. USTDA is on the front line of helping projects go from concept idea to bankable, financially viable projects that developers can take to the bank to move from concept to financial close. Whether it be through feasibility studies, technical assistance, or reverse trade missions, USTDA builds lasting partnerships between the U.S. private sector and countries, both public sector and private sector, throughout the Indo-Pacific region. Through these partnerships, our overseas partners gain insight and access to innovative U.S. solutions to help meet their development goals. This Indo-Pacific strategy that the administration has laid out, I think it's worth recognizing the shift that's taking place within the government. I think that there's tremendous shift with XM, with DFC. USTDA itself is doubling its size this coming year in the Indo-Pacific region. We're doubling our staff size. The administration has realigned resources to recognize the tremendous opportunity that's taking place throughout the Indo-Pacific region and wanting to drive greater U.S. investment, greater U.S. companies into the region. And USTDA is so excited to be on the front lines of this effort. Let me talk briefly about LNG and the energy space, because I think it best demonstrates the work that USTDA does on the early investment analysis. Many years ago, USTDA worked with PTT on the first LNG import terminal. That set the framework for what we're doing under our gas infrastructure initiative, which is focused on energy development across the whole value chain. In Vietnam, we're working with EVN on a development of LNG terminal and gas-fired power. In India, we're working on the a gas transmission grid in order to make sure that the gas that's being brought on shore makes it to the customers throughout India. And we see a tremendous opportunity, and we're excited to hear from Chris and GE about that value chain. But again, this is all designed to support greater investment, greater exports, and drive economic growth throughout the region. And we've taken an all-above approach. LNG has been a driver of our program, but right after this program, we're going to be concluding an agreement with India, a private sector developer in India, to look at how to take agricultural waste and turn it into biocrude to transform India's energy development and lower the emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. I'll leave it with that. I know we've got a lot to cover, a lot of ground to cover.
Well,
but thank
great
you very
introduction
much.
and leads right into Cheniere and Chris Smith. Chris was, as I said, is the Senior Vice President for Cheniere, covering policy, government relations, and public affairs. But previous to this, you were Assistant Secretary at the Department of Energy, working on oil and gas issues. And then you've had an incredible career, Chris, which has touched on finance at JP Morgan and Citibank. You've also had a stint in the U.S. Army in Korea. And you've also worked for a couple of the major petroleum companies, including Chevron. So I'll turn it over to you with that introduction and let you tell us a little bit about Cheniere and how you're going to play in the infrastructure game in Southeast Asia or in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay. Thanks so much, Alex, for that kind introduction. And it's a pleasure to go after Tom and hear you emphasize LNG in your comments. So perhaps we'll get to talk a little bit more about some of that. So my name's Chris Smith. I'm with a company called Cheniere. So we export liquefied natural gas from the United States. So essentially we buy natural gas from across the U.S. We turn it into LNG in our two facilities, and then we sell it to markets throughout the world. So you just heard from the previous panel, which was an energy panel. This is an infrastructure panel, so we'll try to emphasize some of the unique infrastructure aspects of the things that we work on in the LNG value chain and how we work closely with governments and with off-takers across the world to bring energy diversity and supply and security of supply to our customers across the world. I'll emphasize the importance of partnerships in everything that we do. The LNG value chain is a little bit different than some other commodities. Essentially, we go out and we sell the gas through long-term sales and purchase agreements with off-takers, with buyers across the world. And then based on making those sales, allows us to go out and finance the next tranche of infrastructure that supplies the gas that we just sold. So that necessity to build partnerships makes forums like this extremely important. This is a region of the world that's going to be incredibly important for energy in general, but LNG in specific. When you look at where the growth comes from, where economies are growing, and where new infrastructure investments have to be made, this part of the world, this area, this region is one that's of particular importance to companies like mine. And in order to do that well, it requires us to work very closely with government agencies. You heard earlier from the Exim Bank. We'll talk a bit about how we work with USTDA here in this panel, but also working with governments throughout the region. Those conversations, those partnerships, creating those relationships helps infrastructure providers, infrastructure market participants who want to build the infrastructure to create those opportunities to actually come and make these investments in these fast-growing economies. So I look forward to the conversation to come. But again, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be part of this very distinguished panel of subject matter experts. So thanks.
So now we're gonna pivot a little bit to Wouter van Wersch, who is as I said, the Asia Pacific president for GE. GE takes that energy, however it comes, and LNG in this case, and turns it into electricity in one aspect of their business. But Wouter will also expand upon our conversation by talking about healthcare and aviation and some of the other areas besides power that GE is engaged in. And Wouter's own experience is pretty incredible. He's actually worked in aviation for Airbus. He's worked in telecommunications for Alcatel. He spent a lot of time in Asia running businesses for different organizations. He started with Vivendi, actually marketing their media businesses, and most recently he was with Alstom before they got acquired by GE and ran the power businesses for Alstom in Southeast Asia. So Wouter, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you're going to help round us out, and then we'll take us back to the EEC after that.
Thank you, Alex. You're very well informed now. So yes, GE is an infrastructure supplier. So as you mentioned, energy, aviation, healthcare, that's our core business. About 1/3 of the electricity generated in the world is coming through us. Every 2 seconds a plane takes off with GE engines. And in the end, everybody in this room will touch GE equipment at least once in his life. So we're quite present in this field. We've been in Asia for more than 129 years now. Actually, GE started with a light bulb with a filament from Japan. So you know, Asia has been at the foundation of GE. This region is a fascinating region. It's, as you've mentioned in your introduction, a hugely growing region with a lot of needs. If I just want to highlight two figures on ASEAN, though, 650 million people, 65 million people with no access to electricity. Today, electricity is a sort of a human right. 100 million people that have no access to healthcare. So there's still a tremendous amount of infrastructure needed in the region. So in the forecasts that we see in our industries, in the next 20 years, there's going to be roughly a doubling of the installed base, installed capacity in power. There's going to be a doubling of the number of airplanes flying around in the region, and there's going to be a doubling also of the expenditure in healthcare. So it's clearly three very strong industries. Now, to make all of this happen, there's a lot of things needed, and I think one of the most important things is to get gatherings like these ones, where we're bringing all the stakeholders together. It's not a company, it's not one government, it's not one customer, it's an ecosystem of people that need to collaborate, to work together, to achieve this growth that is needed in infrastructure. The ASEAN region is of course extremely dynamic. There's a lot of great potential But there's definitely some uncertainty in terms of rules, regulations. Financing is a key challenge in the region, and that's something that you see across all the activities. So from a company, from a GE perspective, we're working closely together with everybody in the room to make sure that we bring capabilities to the region. We have a strong footprint of manufacturing. Some of our best manufacturers in the world are based in Asia and run by Asian people, so no expats. We really want to have the local people doing it. So I think the situation is looking very good. We do, however, need a lot of the initiatives that are being talked about over the summit until today. So all the partnerships between the US, Japan, all the other partnerships that are being set up are definitely needed to make things move and to make things move faster. And I think that these kind of events are fascinating and a great learning experience and a very good basis to do more. So very bullish on the region. Still a lot of work to be done, but we are fully in it with all people in the room.
I think we're all in agreement on the opportunity. And one of the great opportunities is right here in Thailand with the Eastern Economic Corridor initiative by the Thai government. And Dr. Kanit Sangsubhan is the Secretary General of the Eastern Economic Corridor. And we think we can look at the Eastern Economic Corridor as a microcosm for what's happening in ASEAN to connect ASEAN, and what's happening in the Indo-Pacific to connect the Indo-Pacific with the rest of the world in terms of infrastructure projects and with each other. So the EEC offers a huge opportunity, and we have, not only do we have the Secretary General here, but we have one of the most accomplished Thai executives, former chairman of the Executive Committee of Thai Airways, also senior role in the state railway of Thailand. Yes. These are aviation and rail are two key components to the EEC. And Dr. Kanit has sat on the Bank of Thailand, the equivalent of the central bank in Thailand here, on their board as well. And he's educated in Canada as well as here in Thailand. And Dr. Kanit, can you help us round out all of this great information that we've heard on the panel so far and help us understand how it's actually playing out in the EEC?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much for the introduction, meaning that whatever I did, I put it in EEC now. So if you're interested in EEC, so it has been a booth on the other side of the street. If you go and visit, you have some book like this that you can enjoy, look into it. This morning, there has some people talking about Dr. Gopsak and the joint Colin has been talking about EEC. I don't want to talk that one, but to try to respond to you, Alex. The first thing is that I found that just the three people combined, you have a lot of opportunities to do the investment on the natural gas. Of course, it's going to be the big one. In EEC, we have one of the project called Mataput Deep Sea Port on the third phase. They said the project status is now PPP of this one has been completed, awarded to the PTT and the Gulf MPT already awarded. It's $1 billion. So USTDA should be joined in some way or the others, and we discuss later about the GE engine. So that is right now is a lot of planes we understand are going to be in Asia, and then EEC will be a part of the global hub. We talk to many. We have the new airport, then we're going to have some of the facilities of the MRO and maintenance of the engines that we'll be looking forward. We have been discussed with the Boeing for some times about doing the work with Boeing on the training as well. But anyway, Alex, I would like to come back to what we found. As has been mentioned about the infrastructure in Indo here. Actually, the ADB said that now 2016 to 2030. Asia needs an investment on infrastructure up to $2.8 trillion, $200 billion a year alone in ASEAN. If you talk about India combined, meaning that you can double it. So that's a big opportunity so far. In the old days, when we do this kind of thing, it's not going to be much of the investment from has been achieved, but right now it's different. ASEAN is quite growing up. and they have the money. But anyway, that money has been estimated by a Standard Chartered that the government in ASEAN would be able to supply the funds just only half of it. The other half have to come from somewhere else, meaning that come from the private sector, those and this, right? So that's one more thing. So that in EEC, we innovate the PPP, public-private partnership, all the projects that we're talking about, the high-speed train, the airport, the new airport, the 2 deep sea port, are all PPP, and very achievable now. So I think 3 of the 4 projects has been passed through the process. The size is around $16 billion gone. Meaning that a lot of investors, if you're interested now, you can join in, you can be a supplier or anything else. So that will be the case. Why we do the PPP? The same thing applies. We do the PPP because we need the new financial architectures that Alex said before, that we need that kind of thing. The money is not in the government anymore. It's in the private sector hand. How can we mobilize that fund to do the infrastructure? That's the art, state of the arts to do. Now, what we expect to see, CLMV mostly, is to upgrading their infrastructure up to the level. The growth rate is around 5%, 5 to 8% so far. In case of ASEAN 5, you have the growth rate around 5%, and they need to uplift their infrastructure, like high-speed train, like new airport. Then we're talking about more of the thing in the technology advancement, 5G, for example. All of this country, on the 4-5 countries, will do the 5G, no matter what happens. In the next couple of years, they will announce a thing. What kind of supply, what kind of funding to that infrastructure is still be a puzzle. Half of them they can pay. The other half they have to find a partner. And that's what we found. Just in this case, what the Thai government are doing, that we try to help our neighboring country to lead them and not to lock that kind of thing, because we in between of the ASEAN countries. The government alone, the Thai government alone, has around $90 billion in the next 5 years committed to infrastructure alone, including the MRT, the high-speed train, the 2-track railway, those and this highway. So that's around $90 billion. So that the energies of investing in infrastructure is coming. In case of EEC, then we decided to do the PPP in order to save the money of the government. Then in case of EEC, we already get through. But I hope that this kind of thing will be the example for other ASEAN countries to do the same thing. And there's a lot of opportunities to be there. Please join.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kanit. And obviously, the EEC offers a huge opportunity. One of the challenges to the EEC and any infrastructure project is how are you going to power it? How are we going to get electricity to generate enough power for the needs of a growing industrial base, growing education base, and even just people, we heard earlier in some panels, the 1.5 mobile phones for every member of the 650 million people that live in ASEAN. So we've got to think about power, and that was when I was sort of brainstorming with my team about how we connect these 4 very accomplished executives coming from 4 different very different places. We started that the idea was electricity, power. How could we generate the power that's needed to serve the communities in the Indo-Pacific? And I thought I'd start with Wouter to talk about some of the challenges that you faced when trying to put GE's technology to work in terms of generating more power across the Indo-Pacific region. I'm familiar with what some of the challenges you faced in ASEAN, but in the Indo-Pacific, and you can use ASEAN if you want, what are the challenges you face, and how are you overcoming that, and how are you using relationships with governments and others to help you overcome those challenges, specifically in energy?
I love you putting electricity at the heart of everything, because I think it's true. The previous panel talked about data, internet, but without electricity, there's no data in internet. Huh? So I agree that power is definitely the place to start. There's not one solution. You have to look at every single country. What are the resources that they have locally? Of course, there's a strong push for renewables, and that's something that we really need to do, but renewables is not the only solution. So there's also need for big gas plants. It's been discussed earlier also, and maybe even in some of the countries in the region, some coal plants will still be built. Maybe nuclear will come back. So it's not one only solution. There's a whole scale of solutions. Now, to make this happen, there's a couple of things that need to be done. The first one is the stability of the environment in each of the countries. And that's, I think, a general thing. If you want to make progress, if you want to make investments, there needs to be stability in terms of the policies, the incentives, the regulations, in order not to be surprised by sudden changes. So that's one thing. The second thing is the way of evaluating projects. In Asia, you know, the capex is always taking a very important part in the investments. But people tend to forget a little bit about the OPEX. But the OPEX is actually where you spend a lot of money over the years in projects. So I think the evaluation, the life cycle cost evaluation of an investment is something key to make the right investments. Then there's, of course, the financing side. There's about 70% of the infrastructure that needs to be built out needs financing solutions. That's a lot of money. So banks are looking at it, governments are supporting, but I think that's, at this moment, probably the biggest challenge. If we could get the financing solutions off the shelf is maybe a bit too much, but at least easier accessible. This would really help a lot the rollout of the projects and of the electricity that is needed. So these are some of the main challenges that I see.
Thanks, Wouter. And Chris, you know, LNG has been looked at as the solution for some of the challenges of energy resources to power plants and other opportunities in Asia Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific. Can you talk a little bit about some of the areas that Cheniere is looking at and some of the challenges that you find in the infrastructure environment in the Indo-Pacific to deliver your product from the United States to this region?
Well, certainly. So that's a good frame. So as Wouter mentioned, you know, without electricity, there's no data. But when it comes to gas turbines, without natural gas, there's no electricity. So we take a step up the value chain, and that's where we kind of reside. So one of the great challenges here, as you're thinking about the important issues about how you're going to electrify your country, how you're going to think about diversifying your energy matrix, how you're going to ensure energy security, is that this is it's a question of how capital is going to be deployed. How you find investments, how you bring investors, how you finance these opportunities, but also how the governments make these decisions that are so important for national security, so important for energy security, so important for prosperity, so important for growing the economy. And it's a challenge that governments have in markets that are growing quickly, that are emerging quickly, that have these dynamic environments, but also you have public servants that have to make these very difficult decisions about how they move forward and what path they take in terms of ensuring that they've got the affordable, reliable energy that they need for their economies. You know, speaking personally, I was, you know, I worked at the Department of Energy as a public official for a period of time, in which the United States was thinking for the first time about exporting natural gas, and had to come up with a whole new set of regulations and statute that would allow the United States to permit that activity, to regulate it appropriately for the public sector. And I know firsthand how challenging that is when you're under the microscope that the public rightfully puts you under, to make sure that public officials make the right decisions. And so what we find ourselves doing here at Cheniere is kind of, I'm on the flip side of that challenge now, but working with public officials throughout the region to help make sure we're building the right type of partnerships, that we're thinking about what's the right type of regulatory environment, and that we're working with those officials who are thinking about how do they make sure they do the right thing for the publics that they serve throughout the region. So that's one of the big challenges that we see that we have to deal with. We've got to be a good participant in that. Forums like this are invaluable to us because, you know, it allows us to build these partnerships not only with other private sector companies, but with government officials as we think about, you know, what's the best way that we can participate in a really exciting market, a really exciting economy. And if we look at the places that are going to grow, you know, you've got baseload growth in Asia, you've got baseload growth in baseload amounts of natural gas that will be consumed in Japan and Korea. But when you look at the exciting growth markets, the ASEAN, the Indo-Pacific economies are areas that are of great importance to companies like ours that are looking at building new infrastructure and devoting new capital.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Kanit, you know, the EEC, you heard from my opening and then from our two corporate representatives that, you know, power is going to be critical to all infrastructure in all countries. EEC has got a very ambitious goal to connect this important region of Thailand to the capital, to Bangkok and beyond. But tell us how you're looking at powering the EEC and the opportunities and maybe a couple of the challenges that you see in trying to generate electricity for this region and to achieve the ambitious goals that you have.
Okay, thank you, Alex. That's a very good question. Actually, not only EEC, the Thai government has changed their policy for some times. First of all, the price of the gas, natural gas in this world has been very enticing. We sought to import as another way around to work with it, meaning that we try to do the exploration, yes, but the main source of the energies to come to this area, is especially for the eastern seaboard and also EEC, are mainly from the gas imported. The first thing to come. That's when the energy source we're talking about in the whole country. In EEC, we have been doing the survey that how long it's going to take for us to self-sufficient when we grow this way in terms of energy. So they said the next 5 years fine. But after 5 years, so that'll be a problem. So that we have to start everything today. Right. So that's why it's coming with the deep sea port just for the gas terminal. That's what we prepare for. And the size of this deep sea port is bigger than the old one, so it's going to take 3 to 4 years to completing it. And with that, it's at the case, so we secure a kind of energy source by that gas import. But import can be anywhere around. I don't see the point of Chris. You may elaborate more. What kind of regulation you're talking about that we need to reduce or eliminate in order to have a kind of better environment, better regulation system, better sort of environment doing this work. The terms of regulation that each country in ASEAN gonna have in terms of energies part those and this. The other way around, what we, as I said, when we're doing this thing, we diversify the source to the PPP, and we're promoting the private sectors in EEC to do the work instead of the government do the work alone. Now, meaning that from now on, as we experience on doing the PPP, so the financial source is not the G2G anymore. It's a kind of private sectors, financial institution, no matter what international institutions like ADB, like AIB, like JBIC, those are the ones who are supporting our private sector to do the work. The same thing applies. So that the modalities of the financing has been changed quite a bit. And that's found to be a right combination of the whole thing. I think that can be. In EEC, yes, if you answer to Alex, yes, we need a lot of investment in energies, no matter what it is. No.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kanit. And Tom, this is sort of lead up to you, and USTDA has been a real source of pride for American business, and your role in helping facilitate the challenges that some of our executives find, and also the challenges of government officials like Dr. Kanit. Can you give us some examples of how TDA is supporting and rising to some of these challenges and some of the programs you have in place that are helping American companies, but also opportunities like the EEC tap the U.S. private sector.
Sure, thank you. And let me maybe pivot a little bit using the energy as a base.
Okay.
The energy that's being developed by LNG, by GE turbines, is creating the manufacturing base throughout the Indo-Pacific region. But as that manufacturing base continues to rise and expand, it's requiring greater connectivity within the region, greater connectivity across the world. And I think that one of the areas that USTDA is focused on, which is a little bit different than the energy side, is aviation development. And that in aviation development is not project specific necessarily, but looking at root causes that are inhibiting greater trade, greater development. We look at aviation safety, airspace congestion, airport development, just generally aviation modernization. And we've seen firsthand how a little bit of funding from USTDA can go to that question you're asking of what are the programs that are tipping the scale. For many years, we worked in Vietnam with CAAV on the modernization of the safety of the air aviation system in Vietnam. The result of that was the FAA and ICAO went in and certified Vietnam as a Category 1 flight safety. What does that mean? That means Vietnam has direct access to flights between the United States and Vietnam. It provides greater confidence in the airlines. It provides greater confidence in companies being able to invest. And it's given us an ability to work much more broadly within Vietnam and the aviation space. And this week, I'm fortunate to be with Secretary Ross, and we're in Indonesia and Vietnam, and each one of those we're going to be talking about the launch of an aviation cooperation program, where USTDA is bringing U.S. industry together with the U.S. government to address these challenges these countries are facing. I know the EEC is challenged as you're building out the airports of how do we address aviation safety and airspace congestion. And that it's a really unique opportunity to invest in ways that are taking advantage of the energy that's being developed, that's growing the manufacturing base to make sure that the people and the goods are able to make it to the destination that they're needed.
Well, you bring up a great point, and I think that in all of this, whether it's financing or development of the aviation industry or healthcare, we really need to come together as partners and develop partnerships, whether it's government to government, PPP model, where it's private sector to government, or just through multilateral development banks. We need to find different partnerships to actually get over the hump, if you will, for these opportunities in infrastructure. And Wouter, since Tom opened the door to pivoting from power and energy, I'm going to go back to you and ask that maybe you could talk a little bit about the partnerships GE is developing in healthcare, as well as maybe a little bit in power, but maybe focus on healthcare partnerships that you've developed and talk about the healthcare opportunities. And for those of you who don't know, healthcare is actually part of infrastructure. It's not a bridge, a road, an airport, but without a good healthcare system, the country's infrastructure and their business community will break down. So, Wouter, tell us a little bit about what GE is doing in healthcare.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just, in terms of partnerships, there's 3 types of levels. And actually, I'm not separating healthcare and power and aviation, because actually we have a lot of collaboration of inventions, innovation in aviation that is applied in our gas turbines and vice versa. So I think it's a joint approach. So first partnering is technology-wise. You need to be, as a company, always pushing to the limits, get the most efficient gas turbines, jet engines, healthcare, ultrasounds. So that's something that you do yourself, or by partnering with startups, being open to innovation, new ideas. So that's on the technical side. Then on the execution and project side, in this region, for example. We do a lot of partnering with Japanese EPCs, for example, or with financing from Japan or from the US. So we put together the right team to be successful on projects. And it's never the same team. Sometimes we also leverage Chinese EPCs. It's really depending on the project, the location, and the type of activity that is needed. So again, that's another type of partnership that you need to look at. And the third one, which I think is very important, is in terms of building the capabilities locally. It's partnering with universities. You know, the future of our employees or Cheniere's employees is being developed now. The students are at university, and if they are not trained to be the right employees that we need and really thinking about the future technologies, then it's going to go wrong. So that's something that we push a lot, partnering together with the educational system. And the EEC can be a good part of it, for example, in Thailand also, to build the capabilities locally. So there's different types of cooperation, partnerships that you need to look at.
Well, you've given a great pivot to Dr. Kanit, and you know, the EEC is actually thinking about education and has actually built a university with some funding from the private sector. Maybe you could talk a little bit about using education as a model, but you can go beyond that. The public-private partnerships that we talked about backstage, and you mentioned in your opening statement. But talk to us about how PPPs will power the EEC.
I think it's just the crucial factors. We did the survey for the investor to come to EEC. The first one of impediment, the needs they wanted is the livable city. And the second one is human resources. Without human resources, they cannot be located, they cannot do anything. So that's kind of the second, very, very important. But the point is that when we do the education, so as I said, the PPP is one model. It can be done in terms of some cases, like some university want to be located here. We can be able to get the government hands to do the PPP. And at the same time, actually, Alex, when you do the education, you need a subsidy. You cannot be other way else. You have to have the subsidy in some way, somehow. So that we prepare to have the funding, the group of funding to finance this kind of thing as the additional instrument that we can bring them in, and that's a crucial part. So when we're talking about the development in EEC, we are not talking about one sector. We're talking about the holistic issues that when we want to do investment like this, we want to have this kind of education. So we track it down and get to the point. In case of the GE, you're talking about the aviation or the healthcare. So that what we want to learn, what we learned as the example for ASEAN host for investment, we want to learn a sort of conceptual project, what you want to do. Then, if you do the aviation, it's not just do the engines, you do training, you do other thing else. It's a combined solution, right? So that we can able to make it bankable by having have the incentive, those and this to help the things happen. With new paradigms will come in that the cooperation, as you said, it's not going to be one project by one project, but cooperation in terms of the long-term investment. And that's a very crucial thing. I think Thomas talked about the airport. Yes, we need to combine to do regulation on that part. And the FAA is one of them. We work closely with them. And then when we start to finish the bidding of the airport, so then we talk to you about this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kanit. And Chris, Cheniere, I think, needs to partner with a lot of different entities in order to get from where you are in the United States in terms of collecting that energy source, the LNG, or actually the gas, and then liquefying it, and then bring it over to Asia, to the Indo-Pacific, and then regasifying it, and then either through pipelines or through virtual pipelines, trying to get it to your end customer. Tell me about sort of the partnerships that you're developing, how you're working, what parts of the infrastructure are you wanting to own, where are you financing some of that owned and operated infrastructure, and then how are you partnering with others?
Yeah, well, great question. So the infrastructure that we build directly are the terminals, the plants that we finance and build in the United States and the Gulf of Mexico. So over the past 10 years, we've invested about $30 billion in 2 terminals in the Gulf of Mexico, one in Texas and one in Louisiana. In terms of monetizing those terminals, in terms of making sure that we're getting value out of the terminals, that we're pushing supply to the market, to the economies that need it, the primary partnerships that we have to build are with the buyers who need that natural gas. Now we've talked, I've mentioned a bit about the demand piece of the market here in ASEAN countries in the Indo-Pacific. But overall, the supply is global. And what you'll see is throughout the world, in East Africa, in the Middle East, in the United States, in Russia, you're seeing a lot of new infrastructure being built. And when we think about infrastructure in the LNG market, we look at millions of tons per annum. That's the metric we use for size. So in the global market, on the supply side, we see about 300 million tons per annum of feasible new projects that are chasing a much smaller amount of demand, probably 80, 90 million tons per annum of potential demand, which means that in markets like the ones we're talking about today here in the Indo-Pacific and in ASEAN, what we have to do is demonstrate reliability, cost effectiveness, all of those things that our buyers care about, so that we can compete effectively in these markets. So really the partnerships that we have to bring, that we have to build, are with potential buyers, and that's something that takes time, it takes trust, it takes effort, but over the course of the last year, Cheniere's been successful in signing 7 long-term sales and purchase agreements that we've used to backstop some of our investments in the U.S., which are also pushing the final investment decision investments throughout the region that are taking that gas, that LNG, and turning it into natural gas for the markets.
Well, thank you for that, and Chris, we appreciate that. But I am looking at the time, and I think what we have time left to do. Unfortunately, there's a lot more questions on my roster, but the reality is we want to get this show back on time, so we're going to give 10 minutes back. And what I'd like to do is ask my panelists. There's a minute or two for each of you. What is your final leave behind for the audience? The areas that we didn't maybe touch upon. Tom, we'd love to hear about how you're doubling down on the Indo-Pacific and what that actually means on the ground. But for each of you, you've got 1 to 2 minutes to tell the audience what we didn't cover and what you'd like to have them leave behind. And since we started with you, Tom, why don't we go in reverse order? We'll start with Dr. Kanit, and we'll go to Wouter, and then Chris, and then finish up with Tom. So, Dr. Kanit, 1 or 2 minutes about your takeaways.
So actually, what I try to summarize here is that if you're talking about infrastructure, ASEAN is the area that has a lot of demand coming up in the next 5 years to 10 years. It's keep up rising. In the old day, you're talking about 10 billion US dollar a year. Now you're talking about 100 billion US dollars a year. So that's just keep increasing. Because the GDP is growing up, everything is needed here. The first thing. The second thing is that the way to financing is the key. But the financing today is up to your genius to make it happen, right? To make it bankable. It's no longer the G2G, believe me. But anyway, in a way forward, in terms of linkage to the education, to this, as a whole package of the whole thing, including investment. I believe that they will be a big challenge for us to do. But so to speak, when we're talking about the United States itself, it's a little bit far away from what we have before. We need to narrow that gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kanit. Wouter?
Well,
we've covered a lot with G does.
No, first of all, I think this Indo-Pacific Forum is a fantastic event, and bringing together everybody is something that we really need to do even more often. I think as an industrial company, of course, our focus will always be bringing the best technology the most efficient, the most reliable technology to the market, be it gas turbines, wind turbines, jet engines, healthcare equipment. So that's really what we are going to focus on. But we can't do this alone. Your question about partnership is a true one. If I look here, I've got 3 fantastic partners here, not only on the panel, but also business-wise. We work together with Cheniere. We work, of course, USTDA is a great support all across the region, and the EEC, also fantastic opportunities. So it's a team sport. We need to make it happen all together. So I think that's really something we will continue to do. And last but not least, being local. You need to be in the countries, you need to be here. Myanmar is not like Indonesia or Vietnam or India or China. It's all very different countries. You need to have local people there, and that's what we do, and we will continue to do this as GE, being a local player, working together with the governments, our customers, to bring progress to the region.
Thank you. And Chris?
So the topic's infrastructure. Infrastructure is really about capital, and capital seeks growth. And I guess the last point I'd make is that when it comes to growth, this is the exciting market. I mean, this is the place where companies like ours are focusing. You know, Thailand, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. So when we think about, you know, what are those dynamic markets that are going to be growing in the future, that are making important infrastructure decisions, like right now, they're making those regulatory and those strategic and energy security decisions that are going to drive the next couple of decades of capital and growth. It's right here in this region. So that's why this is an area of such important focus for us, is because this is the part of the world where things are really happening. So it's great to be part of a forum like this and have this opportunity to talk to this group of decision makers and subject matter experts, because this is really a part of an integral part of our business model.
Thank you. And Tom, I have to thank you for all TDA has done to make actually this whole day happen. Your leadership has been critical not only today, but throughout the development of the Indo-Pacific policy and the opportunities that you're opening up. So the last word is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. And I guess the one takeaway I would leave, firstly, thank you, Alex, for moderating this panel. But this resource guide, it is a roadmap for companies throughout for companies to find business opportunities throughout the region. USTDA has never done anything like this in the Indo-Pacific region. And we went out and found the 70 best projects around the region, and countries all over the region have put together project summaries, project descriptions, timelines for investment decisions, and provided contact details of the project sponsors for all 70 projects. I saw not a lot of people running to plug in their flash drive into their computer. So assuming that you're not going to be doing a lot of that, we will be sending around a web link later tonight that will have this whole resource guide available online for everyone in this room. And I think it's literally a map to find new business opportunities that will spur greater investment, greater market opening avenues for sales of U.S. goods, services, and perhaps transform even further the Indo-Pacific region. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you for your leadership. But I want to thank the panel. $20 trillion, a lot of infrastructure opportunities out there. I want to thank particularly the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Thai Chamber of Commerce for helping to put this together with the U.S. government and Thai government. So thank you all for listening. We hope you have a great rest of your day. There's more panels to come, so stay tuned. And please join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman, and all distinguished panelists for your contributions. I think we're all ready to have some coffee and refreshments. I really encourage everyone to stretch your legs and have more caffeine in your system. And at the same time, we will need to move fast as we are quite a bit behind schedule. The coffee break is going to be shortened down to 10 minutes. and which means everyone gets to finish earlier, have dinner sooner, go to bed earlier, and end up looking younger. So there can only be positive outcomes from this shortened coffee break, and I look forward to seeing you all back here in 10 minutes. Thank you.